Welcome back. This is part 3 of how to write a 12 essay in just 10 days. So let's get started with the 10 steps. Number 1, as soon as you're done reading the prompt, you must come up with 3 to 5 examples. Remember, you must do this before you write your thesis. The trick here is to let your examples dictate whether you agree or disagree with the prompt. Second step is to either agree or disagree, and you're only given 10 seconds to do this. If the question is an open-ended one, then by now you should have come up with the response and take a stance. And by the way, to come up with 3 to 5 examples, step 1, you shouldn't take more than 20 seconds. Now, if it takes you longer than that, then you need to stop right now, try to come up with more examples and do research on them before you can move on to step 2 and 3. Step 3, third step, is to write your thesis. Now, follow these simple guidelines. You start with the keyword. So say the prompt is honesty is always the best policy. So if the question says is honesty always the best policy, then you start with the keyword honesty. And then you agree or disagree. And that's, of course, step number 2. And then, of course, you have to explain the why. Now, without the why, all you're doing is repeating the prompt. So you need to answer the why. So I can say, for example, honesty is crucial to build and maintain trust. So I've done all 3. Honesty, keyword, I agree that it is the best policy, is crucial, and why, to build and maintain trust. It's simple as that. You've built your thesis. Of course, you can make it stronger, but for now, let's stay simple. Step number 4, once you're done writing your thesis, it's time to default to your template and plug in 1 or 2 sentences to complete your intro. By template, I mean you should have by now written 1 or 2 sentences generic enough that you can just plug in no matter what the prompt. So I'll give you an example as we go. Step number 5, and now that you've done with the intro, now it's time to introduce your first example and sort of rewrite your thesis, and this is what I call transitional thesis. So start with the transitional phrase, then add a modified version of your thesis. And by what I mean by modified version is that you have to now include your example in the thesis to make it more relevant. So it's quite simple. I mean, I know the explanation is kind of confusing, but put it this way. Now you need to transition to move on from, say, intro to body paragraph number 1. So I say as demonstrated by, or I can say as shown by, or through the actions of, or I can even say in the novel 1984. So say, let's stick with honesty, always the best policy. So I can say in the novel of Mice and Men, and I have to mention the author by John Steinbeck, comma, and I can say that George and Lenny, they maintained this tight bond friendship because they trusted each other. Now, if you can really say that in one simple sentence by starting with the transition and then, of course, mixing your example with the thesis, then that would be the stage. So once you're done with plugin, and then you move on to the transitional thesis. Now this process here, accelerated plugin. Now this is the 80% that I just mentioned, right? So once you're done, you have to now fully rely on your template and plug in all details related to your example. So say you use Novel of Mice and Men for your first example. Now it's time to plug in everything that you know about the plot, the characters. Of course, you have to only use details and information that are relevant to the prompt. But as long as you can come up with, you need to write at least 6 sentences, and you only have 2 minutes to do so. So that's why it's called accelerated. You have to move on really fast. You have to write fast. But this is a really good opportunity to build what I call volume. So the more you write, of course, it's better, right? So step number 7 now. Now that you've built volume, you must make some sense out of it. I call this section the PI section. PI stands for personal input. Write 1 or 2 sentences explaining how all this information that you just plugged in tie back to the prompt. For example, say if you went on writing about the novel of Mice and Men, now it's time for you to explain how all this detailed information that you just wrote really helps support your thesis. So I can say, I'd rather you start with these three words. Either you go with therefore, hence, or thus. So say you say therefore, then say therefore the actions of, say, George and Lenny prove that trust is really important, and for there to be trust, you need to be honest with each other. So that would be kind of the idea. I hope you get this idea. And as long as you can write that in a simple sentence, that's what I call PI. Step number 8. Repeat this process twice more, so you end up with 3 body paragraphs, not 2, but 3. And this is very important. If you want to get a double digit, you need to come up with 3 examples and write 3 body paragraphs. Step 9 is your conclusion. Conclusion is pretty much a plug-in too. Again, you need to come up with one or two, maybe maximum three paragraphs already kind of preset, pre-written, and all you need to do is just plug in and modify just a little bit to make it kind of custom fit to the prompt. So just make sure that you add the word indeed though somewhere in the sentence to make it stronger. Why indeed? Because it is a reinforcing word that helps give a stronger impression. So when I say John is handsome or Jenny is beautiful, right? If I add indeed to it, say John is indeed handsome, or I say indeed John is handsome. So what I'm doing is I'm reinforcing. So whatever I say times two. So it's really good to add the word indeed or something kind of similar to it, more of a reinforcing word. Then that does the trick of making your conclusion really strong. Step number 10, lastly, make sure that you take at least a minute or so to go back and make sure that you haven't made any silly mistakes. Now, I've seen so many students leave out a whole sentence because either they forgot or ran out of time. If you want to go back and maybe check some spelling or make sure that you add or you fill some blanks and so forth, just take a minute to do that. So in total, you shouldn't take you more than 16 minutes. I think if you add them all, it's about 16 to 17 minutes. And of course, you have to finish this in under 18 minutes. So do not give yourself full 25 minutes again, because when you take the real one, it's not going to feel like 25 minutes. Give yourself maximum 18 minutes, but if you can finish this under 16, maybe 17, 18 minutes, that would be great.